Welcome to everybody. This webinar is going to be recorded and we will send you the recording tomorrow or on Monday. Thank you very much for joining. Today is the last day of IEC Discovery Week, and we are going to close this week with the University of Cambridge and the University of Oxford. And I'm going to talk really fast about IEC. We are an education agency that we have been leading the university counseling sector in Spain. We have been working for 26 years, helping students that want to study their degrees abroad. And we send around 300 students every year to countries like United Kingdom, United States, Canada, Denmark, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Australia, and New Zealand. Here below you have our telephone and our email in case you want to get in contact with us. If you are planning on studying your degree abroad, we can help you. Thank you very much. And now I will leave Tom to share his screen.
Thank you. I'll just double check actually before I do that. Sam, have you got it there? Because I have it just in case. There we go. Fantastic. So just while we're waiting for that first slide to come up, my name's Tom Trower. I'm one of the international student recruitment officers at the University of Oxford, with my remit being Australasia and Europe. And then I'm joined by Sam Twells, who is the regional manager for Cambridge and focuses on Europe specifically. So today's session or presentation is going to look at why Oxford and Cambridge initially, and then maybe we'll go towards the application system and process that we have, which is handy because it's currently opened on the 7th of September, and the deadline for applying to Oxford or Cambridge is the 15th of October at 6 p.m. UK time. With regards to what we're going to be talking about, when I'm talking, it should be quite obvious, but when I'm talking, I'll be doing it in the context of Oxford. When Sam talks, he'll be doing it in the context of Cambridge. There are many similarities between the two universities and the processes that we get you to go through with regards to doing an application, but there will also be some very slight differences as well. So yeah, just when I talk, it'll be in that context, and Sam will be in the context of Cambridge. So first off, we'll look at why either institution initially. Essentially, we'll start off with both institutions that are world leading and have been some time with regards to higher education. And this is both for a very long time. Funny enough, I did a session earlier whereby I can't remember the exact date for Cambridge, so I may be able to chip in. I think it was the 13th century. Oxford, there isn't really an official founding date, but it was something along the lines of 1096. So very, very old. And then really started to become a centre of learning from about 1160s onwards. So both really old and have been world-leading centres of learning for a very, very long time. With regards to more contemporary, more now, central to our world standings or the world-leading standards that we have is the way that students learn with us. We have what you'd expect, so that would be lectures and seminars and practicals, depending on the course that you're in. But we've also got small group teaching. So at Oxford, this is tutorials. At Cambridge, it's supervisions. And a supervision or a tutorial at Oxford or Cambridge is essentially, excuse me, a tutor in our instance, who is an expert in the field that they're going to be talking about with you in this, and typically 1, 2, maybe 3, but more likely 1 or 2 students. And so it's a really, really small learning, a very, very small class type learning session that you'll be in. The frequency of it, again, varies course by course, but normally you have one a week. And it's a chance to get feedback on the work you've done. Not formally assessed, but it's an opportunity. So it's an opportunity to take risks with ideas, delve deeper into a subject area, frame arguments and counter arguments. And we both have these, and they are central to how we learn. And that's also relatively unique to how you learn as well at UK universities. And on top of that as well, we've got some really fantastic resources and relatively unique resources too. So Lots and lots of libraries. That's whether it's university as a whole, departmental libraries or college libraries. There's computer suites, there's labs, there's museums and collections. From an Oxford perspective, we've got Pitt Rivers, the Ashmolean, the Natural History and the History of Science museums. I was in the Ashmolean last week, actually. It's an amazing place to go to anyway. It's free, but it's also really useful for some courses as well. And also, we also have world-changing and world-leading research too. And that is, again, at the heart of both universities, is groundbreaking research. And that's research by staff, students and graduates as well. So you really would be a part of this really exciting frontier of research across many different areas. An obvious and contemporary example for me is the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine for coronavirus, which came out last year really quickly, and that really would be, you potentially could be a part of that if that was the subject that you were involved with. So that's quite exciting, and we both have you would have a similar experience with both institutions. What also is also, I've kind of gone across two slides, but I'll continue here. With what also is at the forefront of this is the academic side of things too. So that also comes hand in hand with the research that I've just talked about. Sorry, Sam, I think, oh no, we're all good. My thing's just frozen on me, apologies. If I could go to the next slide, sorry, Sam. There we go. Excellent. Sorry, I lost my thread there. What also is really a part of Oxford and Cambridge that not many of the UK universities like is the colleges or the collegiate system that we have. There is no centralised campus for either Oxford or Cambridge. There are some centralised parts of the university, but essentially the universities are both made up of lots of different colleges and halls. Both have around 30-ish colleges each, and then some private halls as well. But these colleges are at the heart of our reputations as world-leading universities. They are sometimes compared to halls of residence at other UK universities, but they're actually much, much more besides just where you live as well. Before you arrive, this is where your application will get processed. So initially, depending on if you make a preference or not, it will come to the university centrally, and then this is after you've submitted your UCAS application. Then they'll go out to all the different colleges, so they will be dealing with that initially. And it's more than likely where you will be interviewed, whether previously to COVID, physically, or as with last year and this year, virtually. Again, in Oxford's case, you would be more than likely to have an interview with more than one college as well. So just bear that in mind. But when you are here, your college will be your home, as mentioned. But they also provide meals, a library, IT support. You'll have a GP, so a doctor and a nurse associated with that college as well. Social opportunities there too. So there's something called the JCR, which is the Junior Common Room, again with regards to Oxford, which is both a physical room and a student body as well that sort out all of your social opportunities. So you have instant fun, I guess, as soon as you come here. Fitness facilities, prayer rooms if needed. So lots and lots of different things that are there for you to be able to get involved with as well. So it's not just where you stay. There's many, many more things besides colleges. And I guess this is something that I think Sam and I will mention a couple of times, but it's always good to say it once and say it again and say it another time. With regards to college choice or preference, you can either do two things, which is to either have an open application or choose a preference. Now, with regards to an open application, that just means that you don't have a preference. So it will be sent to the university. There's an algorithm in our case whereby you'll be put into whichever area it is. So a college that offers your subject to then give you an interview if you make it through to interview, and then you'll be given to probably to another college as well to interview with too. So open application just means that you could have any college, or you could make a preference of college, and that just means that you prefer to have your application go to a certain college as well. However, again, that doesn't mean that you will get that particular college if you are given an offer to. So there's no advantage or disadvantage to making either an open application or choosing a preference. It's the same no matter what. Which makes you think, well, why would I choose a particular college? Well, that could be because of a particular thing. So as you can see here, most colleges have And again, at both Oxford and Cambridge, we'll have very similar facilities. So there'll be accommodation, you've got the JCR there, so there will be a physical room and a student body, library and computing facilities, you'll be able to have a dining hall and bar, and then sports facilities more than likely. What then differentiates, or where you may choose a different college, could be it may only offer a certain subject. So not every college offers every subject, so that's something to bear in mind. You may want to go for a really small, more intimate college, or you may want to be, in our case, in St Catherine's, St Cat's, which is the largest college, Oxford as well. So you know that there's going to be lots of people there. It could be smack bang in the middle of the city. So Sam and I were doing a session either last week or I think it was last week, where I was luckily at one of the colleges. I was in Brasenose College, and I was able to show people, I can't do that here sadly, I was able to show people what it was like out the window, and it's right in the middle of Oxford, right on the high street, right next to the Radcam, which is the Radcliffe Camera, very, very pretty library. So it may be that you want to live in a place like that, or it may be that it's closer to your department buildings as well. So all of these things you may take into account, but there really isn't an advantage or disadvantage to choosing a college or making an open application. So just bear that in mind. And it's, again, we'll mention that again, I'm sure, later on a couple of times. What we both have as well, very important, and this is something that colleges and the university centrally as a whole take into account and see it as a very important thing, is students' welfare and having support when you're here. So there are many different things. Again, both universities have maybe slight differences in what they offer. I've already mentioned that colleges will have a GP and a nurse attached to them, or a nurse that visits every week or every 2 weeks or whatever it is, just to make sure that you're okay. But there are other services besides. So we have the counselling service, which is professionally led, so professional counsellors who can provide one-to-one support, again, online or in person. They can also provide group support as well, and give you other activities to do with them, and provide continuous support or short-term support if needed. And we've also got the Disability Advisory Service, and this is something that can be picked up on during your UCAS application now. So you're able to put in if you have any accessible need on that UCAS application. Both universities will look at that, and the earlier you do it, the more able we are to help you if you need anything. So if you think about the application, which we'll talk about, admissions tests, it may be that you need extra time in admissions tests, so we can make sure if we have that now, then we're able to utilise that for part of your application cycle too. If it's a case of if you need wheelchair access for your interview, if it was face-to-face, which not this year, but it's an example to make, then we'll make sure that that's available to you too. And then when you get here, that means that support, we already have it, and we can continue to make sure you're supported throughout. The students' unions, again with Oxford, we have a student-run helpline, nightline, so it's student-led, it's confidential. So if you do need to talk to somebody outside of professional help and you don't want to talk to friends about it, you have a confidential line that you can talk to too. And we also have the family system, the college family system. So what that means is when you arrive at your college, there will be second-year students who will be designated as your parents, essentially, and they are an instant support network for you. So they would have had it themselves. So then they would have grandparents and great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents. So you may find out that one of your great-great-great-great-grandparents was Bill Clinton, potentially, because he came here. So that's, or maybe even Tolkien, I guess. I don't know if they did it back then. But the point is that you have this instant support network when you get here as well. So there really is a lot of support for you to be able to have there. And the colleges also have financial perks too. So that it may be that they can make they'll subsidise food. Well, they will subsidise food. Food's a lot cheaper, but they may also be able to help out with any emergency costs that you need to. Excellent. And then we'll move on to the application process, which I believe
that's me.
Is over to you, Sam.
I will take over at this point. Thanks very much, Tom. So in this next section, we're going to run through a little bit about what we're looking for in applicants to either Oxford or Cambridge, some of the information that we have available to us, and then we'll start going into stages of the application process in a bit more detail. So first off, just wanted to give you an overview of all the information we collect during the application process. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, admission to Oxford and Cambridge is quite competitive. So we feel that in order to fairly assess the applicants that we get, we have to look at all the available information. And so everything that you see on this slide is considered together. It's a very holistic admissions process. There isn't one particular stage that I could point to on the slide here and say that's the stage you've got to nail. It is all considered together rather than looking at things in isolation. Often we hear of a lot of rumours around admission to Oxford and Cambridge that the interview process is the most important part, and that is absolutely not the case. Once students have been interviewed, we go back and review all the other information that we've collected about them so far in the application process, and make sure that we're looking at their interview performance in the context of information they've submitted to us so far. Now, all successful applicants to either Oxford or Cambridge will be interviewed. So if you receive an offer from either university, it will be because you've been interviewed as part of the application process. Around 75% of Cambridge applicants are invited to interview in any given year. It can vary quite a bit more depending on the course that you apply for at Oxford. And I think there's some more precise information available online around that. We are going to cover each of these bits of information in more detail later on in the presentation. So things like admissions tests and written work and interviews, we'll cover those, as I say, in more depth. But this is just to give you an idea of the level of information we're able to collect, some from your online application form and others from later stages of the process. Now, of course, we are looking for students to be predicted to achieve certain entry requirements. Again, as you can imagine, because admission to both our universities is quite competitive, we have set entry requirements at the higher end of the scale. And because you're applying before you've taken, in most cases, before you've taken your final high school exams, that's why we say predicted grades. So we're looking for your teachers to predict that you're on track to achieve what we would ask for. So I've listed there both universities' entry requirements for the Bachelorate. As you can see, it's pretty much 9s across the board, I think, for both universities, although it is worth looking in more detail on our individual university websites to get the precise details there. If you're taking the International Baccalaureate, we also accept that for direct entry to Oxford and Cambridge. And again, you can see specific requirements there. Perhaps the most important thing to highlight is that some of our courses do have quite stringent subject requirements, particularly in the sciences and courses related to maths as well. So if you are thinking about a course in either of those areas, make sure that you look at the information on the course profile on the respective university's website, and make sure that you're satisfying those subject requirements through your school studies, because we will be looking for those. Our admissions tutors will be looking to see that you satisfy those requirements in order to be eligible for the course. Now, in terms of what we look for more generally in applicants, again, something to remember is that admissions decisions at Oxford and Cambridge are always based on academic criteria. So we're really looking to assess two things through the application process, and that's your academic ability to date, how you've performed in your school studies so far, and also your academic potential. How are you going to thrive at Oxford and Cambridge? Are you going to succeed on the course you've applied for? Are you a good match for the course that you've applied for at either of our institutions? So one of the first things that admissions tutors will always look for is genuine interest in the subject area covered by the course that you've applied for. And this can be shown in a couple of different ways through the subjects that you're taking at school. So particularly in cases where the course might have specific subject requirements, but it can also be demonstrated outside of school as well. And Tom will come on to this in a little while later on in the presentation, but supercurricular activity, this wider subject exploration that you can do in your own time, is really important to us, to our admissions tutors, and we'll look for evidence of this in your application. As I mentioned, some courses do have certain subject requirements, and as a result, we'll be looking for you to have a good knowledge base, and so some academic skills as well that are relevant to your course. And also that you might have the potential to take what you have learned already through your school studies and apply that knowledge to different circumstances, to unfamiliar contexts that our interviewers or admissions tutors might present you with. It is also really important to make sure that you've done some research into the course that you're applying for, so that you know what you're getting yourself in for. You have a good idea of the specialisms or topics that you might be able to choose later on in the course. And particularly for courses like medicine and veterinary medicine, that you have a sense of the career that those courses might lead you into as well. And certainly the application process for courses like medicine and veterinary medicine at Cambridge will be looking to see that you are suited for that career as well as suited for the course itself and the academic study of those subjects. And so, for example, at interview, you may be asked questions that relate to how you would respond in certain situations, as well as academic questions about the subjects underpinning those courses. Just a quick note that at Oxford and Cambridge, we aren't really looking for activities that are not related to your studies, to the course that you're applying for. So things like sports, music, most work experience, a part-time job, for example, things that are unrelated to the course you're applying for, we just won't take those into account. Our admissions tutors will not be looking at those during the application, and they won't carry any weight for us. We are quite unique amongst UK universities in saying that, but just to bear in mind, if you do include Oxford and Cambridge on your applications, that we're really just going to be looking at the academic parts of your application. So here on this next slide, we're just going to give you a very brief overview of the application process to our universities. As Tom mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we do have a lot of similarities between us, and this extends to the application process as well. We'll cover each of these stages in a little bit more depth, but just to give you an idea, as I say, most important stage is choosing a course. It's essential that, as I say, you know what you're getting yourself in for, that you are familiar with the course, that you feel comfortable studying it for a number of years. This could be 3 years as standard, but maybe up to 6 years if you're looking at something like medicine or veterinary medicine. You then think about whether you'd like to choose a college or make an open application, hopefully taking into account some of the advice that Tom gave earlier on in the presentation. At some point during your application, you're very likely to be asked to take an admissions test for which certain registration deadlines apply if you're taking a test at what we call the pre-interview stage. And then the application process will involve you putting your UCAS application together. So this is the online university application portal that you'll use to apply not just to Oxford and Cambridge, but possibly to other UK universities as well. You can apply to up to 5 universities through UCAS, and Oxford and Cambridge, or Cambridge, I should say, should be or could be one of your choices. I say or because it is only possible to apply to either Oxford or Cambridge in the same admissions round, simply because we have quite similar application processes. As you can see, they take place at similar times during the year. It would be an administrative nightmare, unfortunately, to try and sift applicants out if they applied to both. You may be asked to submit some written work as part of your application. This will be if you're applying for an arts and humanities or a social science course. And then your interviews are if you're invited to interview, are likely to take place in December with a decision following in January. Now, as I say, we're going to explore some of these stages in more depth, so I'll hand over to Tom to start us off.
Thanks, Sam. And as Sam mentioned, choosing a course is probably the most important decision you'll make, really. And both universities offer a wide range of courses situated in the academic arts, social sciences, medical and non-medical sciences, and then engineering as well, which is still classified as science as well. In most of these courses, you'll start by covering a subject pretty broadly, and then focus or specialise as you progress through the degree. And you may even be able to do 2 subjects together as well as a joint honours degree, and in some cases 3. So Cambridge has history and modern languages, or history and politics. Oxford, we've got physics and philosophy, or maths and computer science, and then PPE as well, so philosophy, politics and economics. And that's something that you can check out on both of our course web pages, and we really do recommend that you have a look at these, because it does give you an overview of what the course is going to be like, how you're assessed, the different types of modules that you can take within each year as well. And that really should let you should be able to make a pretty good decision off that. Mainly again, because you're going to be intensely studying this subject area for 3, 4, potentially more years, depending on the course that you take. And it really is important that you're a good fit for it and you want to be doing it, because it is such a high level of learning that you're going to be doing. But also the application process that we're going to talk you through now is all about how much you like and are interested in the subject that you're wanting to choose. So it is really important you get that off to a good start. You also may want to look at, and I mentioned it briefly there, about how you're assessed. Oh, sorry, Sam. With how you're assessed, which is both universities mainly have written exams for what you do in third year. But again, it depends on course. It may be that if you take engineering, there may be a final group project that you'd actually do as part of an engineering job. A language course will probably have an oral assessment, and studying a science like chemistry would involve continuous assessment of practical work. So if you like that kind of thing where you're in the lab all the time, I did chemistry, not at Oxford, then that's where I chose that, because that's how I prefer to be assessed. But that is also something really, really important to take into consideration when choosing a course as well. Next up, you've got the personal statement. And this is essentially where you're able to articulate in writing why you want to study that subject or subjects that you've chosen. So again, it is really, really important that it is something you want to do. If you're sat, and this is open now currently for this application cycle, so if you still haven't written your personal statement yet, it's something that we recommend you should have done, or at least get started pretty soon. If you're struggling to write or articulate why you want to study a particular subject, then maybe it's something to reconsider, and maybe is there another course that suits you better. So bear that in mind. If you're struggling to write it down in the personal statement, and if you can think of it in your head but struggling with the words, that's fine. But if it's something where you can't even think why you want to study that subject, then maybe have a look at that, because it's, you've got to be honest here. It may be used later on in your interview as well. So just make sure that what you've written down is definitely what you want to say about it as well. It's a restricted piece of writing, so it's 4,000 characters, 52 lines worth of text. So there isn't much space there to write down much. So just make sure that you get down why you've chosen the course you've chosen and your interest in it, subjects that you studied, and then any supercurricular activities that you've undertaken as well. And we'll get into that very shortly. With regards to extracurricular activities, which aren't relevant to the subject or subjects that you've applied for, Sam kind of touched on this already. We're only really interested in your academic interests. We don't really bother with looking at if you're the captain of the rugby team or captain of the soccer team or do volunteering on the weekend. However, this personal statement will go to any other UK choices that you make as well. So bear that in mind. There may be other universities that do want to know a little bit about that. So that's why we allow, we say 80% of your time, of your personal statement should be spent on talking about the subject and why in supercurricular, and then leave a little bit at the bottom, 20% for extracurricular. But with regards to Oxford or Cambridge, what is really useful is to talk about any transferable skills. And when I say about transferable skills, I'm talking about skills that shows that they will put you in good stead if you were to study at Oxford or Cambridge. So we've mentioned it's intense. It's 40 hours on average a week of study time, whether that be contact or independent study. So you need to show that you're determined and self-motivated. And if you can show that via any extracurricular activities you've done, so I mentioned volunteering, if you've been volunteering for 2 or 3 years, most weekends, that shows a fantastic commitment and showing self-motivation to do that volunteering. And you can say, well, I've already shown that in here, and I will show the same skills with regards to the subject that I'm applying for, or subjects that I'm applying for. So that's really, really important. But also other UK universities that you're applying to may want to know other things as well. So that's why we leave a little bit there. But the vast majority of it that we would recommend is spent 80% on academic and supercurricular related words or content. So what you want to study, why you want to study it. Also talk about anything that you've read or watched or visited, or maybe you shadowed a barrister if you want to do law. And then you need to reflect on those things that you've done. So if you've read a book or lots of different books, why was it interesting? What did you learn from this? Do you have a counter argument against the thing that you read, or do you agree with it? And you can do that for all of these different supercurricular activities that you've done. And when we say supercurricular, we mean it's course related, so subject or course related, but further and beyond your compulsory school curriculum and studies. So it's outside of school, but still subject related. What's really important as well is not to list these things. So you may have done loads, and great, that's fantastic. The last thing that both of our admissions tutors at the universities want to see is just a list of the things you've done, because you need to articulate why. So it may be that, and I've talked with a PPE admissions tutor about this before, and they were saying that one of the personal statements that they came across for PPE was all they did was they took a short paragraph from one of the books they read and they expanded on that. And that showed to that admissions tutor that this student, they took this little thing and they took it really far, and they were able to talk about it and reflect on it and have an argument and counter, whatever it was. They were really, really impressed with that. So it's not about the quantity of things that you've done, although that's a good thing if you have done it. It's about the quality, or maybe even the reflection, the quality of the reflection, and how it challenged you, or why you found it challenging. That's really, really important. So it's not about doing as many as you can. It's about picking up a couple of different things, relating them to the course that you want to study or subjects you want to study, and really getting stuck into that side of things. It doesn't have to just be books. It can be, it can be anything. It could be a science Olympiad that you've taken part in. It could be watching TED Talks. It could be watching YouTube videos on a particular thing. So as long as it's related to the subject, that's the most important thing, really. And as it says here, these supercurricular activities show to the admissions tutors that you've broadened your subject knowledge outside of school. It shows that you have a genuine interest because you've done all of these things and you've reflected on them. Self-motivation is really important, as we mentioned, and independent study. Very, very important too. And also with regards to developing your research and writing skills, two key skills that will be needed at Oxford or Cambridge, is because of the way you're being assessed, or because of the amount of essays that you're going to have to write during the short terms that we have. You need to make sure, and the admissions tutors need to know that you're able and capable to do that. And so doing these supercurricular activities and writing about them in your personal statement will show this ability. And then we go on to particular ideas. So I've mentioned a couple already, but these are some specific ones, and I think there's some really useful ones in here. So we actually have on the top left, we've got HE Plus and Oxplore. These are HE Plus is Cambridge and Oxplore is Oxford. These are our own provided websites which should go in, take things further. So with regards to Oxplore, it's home of the big question. That's where really interesting questions have been formulated between admissions tutors and students that have done this over the past couple of years. And it kind of mirrors maybe the types of questions that you may get in an interview, or you may get in a tutorial or a supervision. So it really gives you an opportunity to pick a subject area and go into it further. So really, really fantastic opportunities to go into there. We've got MOOCs, so the maths courses that you can do as well, the maths online courses, you can do those. They won't count towards your admissions requirements, but again, it shows further interest. Excuse me. We've mentioned TED as well, TED Talks and YouTube videos. These all come together. Again, as long as it's subject specific and it shows further interest in it, then that's really, really useful. The BMJ is a good one to mention with the British Medical Journal because that's linked with medicine. They also have some fantastic reading lists and things that you can do, and also potentially for some work experience too. With regards to Cambridge and Oxford, none of our courses require you to have any work experience. However, medicine is the one that normally would do. But they are very understanding with regards to the pandemic and coronavirus that you may not have been able to do that. And so the BMJ is a fantastic resource to go to and have a look at what you may be able to do or understand or take part in or watch that may help you formulate a competitive application for Oxford or Cambridge to study medicine.
Okay, thanks, Dom. I'm going to jump back in here with the rest of the stages of the application process. We'll start off with something really that if you're thinking of applying to Cambridge, you'll need to consider. If you're thinking of applying to Oxford, this won't apply. But at Cambridge, we have an additional application form. So this is on top of the UCAS form that you'll have completed for all of your UK choices. And it's called the Supplementary Application Questionnaire, or SAQ for short. And essentially all it does is collect some additional information from you that we can't currently get through the UCAS application form. We find it very useful for assessing applicants because it will give us a sense of where you are in your current school curriculum. So some of the information you'll be asked to provide are details of topics that you've covered as part of your IB, higher level subjects, or as part of your baccalaureate subjects. And why that's useful is because our interviewers will be able to read this information to access it. And it will give them a good idea, if you're invited to interview, of what topics you might already be familiar with. And so interviewers can start their interviews with material that you should hopefully be comfortable talking about before moving on to more challenging content. So this is one of the reasons that we ask for that. We also include in the SAQ an optional Cambridge-specific personal statement. Now, this is additional to the UCAS personal statement that Tom's already discussed. And if you feel that you've already said everything you want to say in support of your application in the UCAS personal statement, then there's no need to repeat it here because we will already have access to that. Where this can be useful is in a few scenarios. Let's say you have done quite a range of supercurricular activities. You didn't have room to include all of them in the UCAS personal statement. You can talk about some examples that you didn't have space for on the SAQ. It might be the case that you are applying to a very specific course at Cambridge, or a course that only we offer in its current constitution, but you're applying to similar courses at all of your other UK university choices. So let's say you're applying to natural sciences at Cambridge, but you're applying to a physics course at all of your other UK choices. Now, obviously, we expect that your UCAS personal statement will be very focused on physics. It's completely understandable for that to be the case. But as part of the SAQ on this, on the Cambridge-specific personal statement, you can talk about your wider interests in the physical sciences, in chemistry, whether you have any interest in biology as well. And this will give us a good sense of your wider interests in the sciences, and allows you to essentially send some information just to Cambridge for Cambridge admissions tutors to see, in addition to your UCAS personal statement, which might be very targeted on one particular area. It is, as it says there, entirely optional. So, as you know, as I've said, if you don't feel you have anything more to add, then please don't feel obliged to write something just for the sake of it, because we will already have your UCAS statement. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, it's very likely that if you apply to either Oxford or Cambridge, that you will be asked to take an admissions test at some part of the application process. These usually fall at one of two stages. So we have some courses at both universities that will ask you to take a test at what we call the pre-interview stage. As the name suggests, this is sometime before the interview part of the process would take place, usually in late October or early November. If you are applying this year, then our pre-interview tests are taking place on the 3rd and 4th of November. So it is important that you check the course profile on the website of the university you're applying to, and that will give you all the details of the form of assessment required, whether it's a pre-interview or an at-interview test, and whether you'll need to register in advance. Just to note that all pre-interview tests, you will need to register in advance for those. The registration deadline is usually the 15th of October, but there are a couple of exceptions to that. So for example, the medicine course at both universities, we would ask you to take the biomedical admissions test, and that has an earlier registration deadline of the 1st of October. I believe Oxford asked for the LNAT for their law course as well, and that has an earlier registration deadline too. So do bear that in mind. The best way to prepare for pre-interview assessments is to look at the resources available on both of our websites. We have now a range of past papers in these assessments, and also specifications that will tell you the content that is likely to be covered by these assessments, the knowledge that is likely to be required. So that if you do feel there are any gaps in your school curriculum or in your knowledge up to this point, look at those in advance, and you should be able to hopefully fill those gaps in advance of taking the assessment. Make sure that you keep a couple of papers back just to practice under time conditions and get a feel for what it's like to do these assessments. A lot of our pre-interview assessments are quite tight on time, so you will need to get through a lot of questions in quite a short space of time. So don't be surprised if on your sort of first attempt or first couple of attempts, you're quite pushed to get everything done. Another thing to note as well, with our admissions tests at both Oxford and Cambridge, it may be the case that when you compare your performance in past papers to the mark schemes on our websites, it may be the case that you're achieving well below where you're currently achieving in your school studies. This is entirely normal. These tests are designed to stretch you, to take you beyond what you've covered in school, or to encourage you to apply what you already know from your school studies in perhaps new contexts, new situations. So there isn't really a minimum mark that we are looking for in these tests. We are just looking for some information that will allow us to compare students really in a gathered field, to really tease out the best students who are achieving highly in these assessments. It may be the case, though, that in any given year, an assessment in a particular course might be, the pass mark might be 40 or 50%, and that will just be reflective of the fact, as I say, that these tests are designed really to stretch you from your current school studies. Now, a small number of our courses have at-interview tests instead. You won't need to register in advance for these, as it says on the slide. The college that is handling your application will be in touch with you about all the necessary arrangements for any at-interview test you'll need to take. This year, because interviews will be online and taking place over Zoom or similar platforms like Microsoft Teams, it's likely that your at-interview test would fall a couple of days or so before your interviews. And these, again, will be invigilated online, and you'll be able to take these and then submit your script to the college that is handling your application. Now, I mentioned briefly earlier on that you may need to submit some written work as part of your application. This is only really the case if you are applying for an arts and humanities or a social science course. Admissions tutors in these courses will like to see evidence of your written schoolwork up to this point, and ideally with some teacher feedback on it as well. These pieces of written work you shouldn't write specifically for the purpose of applying to Oxford or Cambridge. As I say, it should be work drawn from your current school curriculum with some feedback, some teacher comments on there, so that we have an idea of where you're performing relative perhaps to the mark scheme for your subject. Make sure that anything you do submit, you're happy with talking about at interview, as your written work may reappear at the interview stage, and you'll be asked to say something further by the interviewers. So do reread that, and of course your UCAS personal statement as well. So just moving on to the interviews now. I have a few slides on these, but we'll go through generally the format of interviews at both Oxford and Cambridge. Typically, they will last between 20 and 45 minutes. You would normally have around 2 interviews at Cambridge, but there could be fewer than 2 or more than 2 at Oxford, depending on the route that your application takes. As Tom mentioned earlier, it's likely that you would have interviews at more than one college at Oxford. So at the college that handles your application, but also at another college as well. The interview structure and what they're designed to assess is very similar at both universities. Essentially, it's an interactive assessment of whether your interests and aptitudes match the course that you've applied for. So are your academic skills and knowledge base a good fit for the course you've chosen to study at either Oxford or Cambridge? We'll also be looking to, of course, assess your interest in the course, your motivation for studying that subject area. Are you interested in the subject itself? Are you keen on studying the subject almost for its own sake, rather than anything that might come after your degree course? We're also looking to see whether you're open to new ideas and information, new approaches to knowledge. Are you able to think around information that the interviewers give to you, or do you stick rigidly to the argument or the solution that you've come up with? And I think the best candidates are often very flexible and are able to incorporate new information that interviewers give them into their argument, to their solution, and change tack. It's very often the case, particularly for courses in arts and humanities and the social sciences, that you're asked to give an opinion. And in some courses, admissions tutors may ask you then to give a counter argument to that. They might give you new information, as I say, that you'll need to take on board. So it is also certainly the case that admissions tutors and interviewers will be assessing how teachable you are, whether you're listening during the interview to things they say, whether you can pick up on the tips or other bits of information they give you. One of the things we'd caution against in preparing for an interview is over-rehearsing answers. Obviously, there are certain questions that you might be able to predict. For example, why have you applied for this particular course? but try not to over-rehearse anything. It is really obvious to our interviewers, the vast majority of whom are very experienced, when a pre-rehearsed answer is being given, and they will just, to be perfectly honest, most of them will just cut across you and ask a different question that they think that will make you think, and that they'll be able to get a better sense of your thought process. Interview questions are designed to be quite complex, certainly the further you go through the interview. So remember that, just bear in mind that you might not be able to answer everything immediately, to think of an answer on the spot. What interviewers are really looking for is to see how you think. And so getting used to thinking out loud is probably the most useful skill you can practice before your interview if you're invited, because it really does help interviewers see what steps you're taking, what stages in your thought process you're going through. If they feel that you're going off at a tangent or getting something wrong, then they can interject with a new bit of information or a hint or a tip, and the discussion can go from there. It's very often the case as well that there are no particular right or wrong answers that they're looking for. They are really just looking for you to explain your thought process, and see where the discussion takes them from there. So a bit more information on what you can expect from interviews. Obviously, the questions, as I've mentioned, are going to be challenging, particularly in later stages of an interview, and they will always be focused on the subject or course that you're applying for. Particularly courses in the sciences and maths, where there are specific subject requirements, admissions tutors will be looking to assess your knowledge base in those subjects. So there may be some basic questions that they would expect you to know the answers to, and then building on that, they'll be looking for you to take the concepts and the knowledge you've already acquired and apply those to quite different sets of circumstances. There are no trick questions during interviews. Again, there are lots of rumors that sort of fly about this part of the process, but it really is the case that admissions interviewers are not trying to trip you up. They really do want to get the best out of you. As I say, I think the best way of doing that from your part is to really try and vocalize your thoughts as much as possible. Another a sort of misconception I think about the interview process is that it's not a job interview. So things like whether you make eye contact with the interviewers, what you wear, we're not really looking at those things. We're just looking at the academic content, if you like, of the interviews. In terms of what they cover, you can see a list of topics there that are sometimes come up, that are likely to come up in some cases. As I've said, make sure that any supercurricular activity or anything you talk about in your personal statement or in submitted work, you're comfortable talking about that, particularly in the case of anything you've read. Make sure you've read it cover to cover rather than just the beginning and end chapters, because your interviewers might be very familiar with that material and ask you about something from the middle. It is also very common now to be given what we call prompt material during the one or both of your interviews. This will be material that you haven't seen before or are very unlikely to have seen before, and you'll be asked to comment on it during the interview. So it might be a graph or a chart, a table or an article, perhaps a short extract from an article, a poem, potentially. And as I say, you'll be asked to comment on this, to make notes on it potentially before one of your interviews, and it will form part of the discussion during the interview with your interviewers. And really the aim of this, often it underpins assessing your academic skills. So for example, if you're presented with a chart or a graph and you're applying for a maths or a science course, then as well as your interpretation, we'll also be looking to see that you can interpret the material that you've been given in line with what we would expect where you are in your current school studies. But just a word on practical arrangements for interviews this year. If some of you are applying in this year's application round, both universities will be conducting virtual interviews. In normal times, this would usually be the case at Oxford for all applicants except for medicine. However, at Cambridge, virtual interviews are sort of slightly more new to us, I suppose, slightly newer. We ran them last year and we will be running them again this year as well for 2022 entry. As you can see, different platforms will be used. So at Oxford, I believe they're going with Microsoft Teams. At Cambridge, your virtual interviews are likely to take place on Zoom or another platform called Whereby, which is very, very similar to Zoom. Now, we've covered a lot of information in this presentation, so I appreciate you may have questions, and hopefully we'll get to some of those in just a moment. If you wanted to find out more information about the courses that we offer, the different stages of the application process and our advice around those, then of course, you're more than welcome to visit either university's website. We have very comprehensive information on there that is regularly updated, so you'll always be sure of finding the most up-to-date information there. You're also very welcome to get in touch with us directly as well via email. You can see the Cambridge address there. You can also contact Cambridge via Unibuddy. So we've recently launched on the Unibuddy platform on our chat to our students page. You can find a number of current international students at Cambridge doing a variety of courses. You can chat to them about their experience of Cambridge. You can also find staff on there. So I'm on there and colleagues from the international team, and of course you'd be more than welcome to contact us through there as well. But for now, I think we'll go to the questions. So thanks very much for your attention so far, and hopefully we'll be able to answer any questions you have in the remainder of the session.
Thank you very much, Tom and Sam, for this amazing presentation. What you were saying is true. There are like many myths and many rumors around the Oxbridge application, and I think today we have uncovered some of them, so it will be like much easier for our students. Sandra, I don't know if we have any questions in the chat.
Yes, we do have some questions in the Q&A. So let me go through them. First question is from a student who would like to know how many applications you receive each year from international students, and what is the percentage of admitted students? Because I imagine that the profiles are very impressive and the selection is very hard, it's competitive. So do you have any idea roughly about this kind of figure?
Luckily, while Sam was talking, I translated that question because it was in Spanish and my Spanish is 0 to none. So I've been able to get a bit of a head on it. So I do actually have the data somewhere. And this is the beauty of being able to do these presentations from home in front of a laptop. I'm just waiting for it to load. So you have to bear with me. I might have to come up with the answer for that in a bit. I think, however, when we talk about stats of applications, I don't know whether Sam may agree with me here, it's very hard for us to have the exact data on hand. So hopefully you can appreciate that. However, it is worth mentioning, and it kind of links in with the question, there are no caps for international students with any of the courses that we offer, apart from medicine for both of us. And that's a UK government directive. We can't get around that. So for medicine at Oxford, it's around 13, 14. Sam, is it just under 20 for Cambridge? 21, so just over 20. So those are our numbers that we can take for international students each year for medicine. So what is already a competitive process is then super competitive for places. When you think about 13, 14 and 21 spaces, there's not many at all. So bear that in mind. With regards to the other parts of the question that's worth mentioning is that there's no real we'd say about college preference and open application. With a domestic or international student, again, as long as the curriculum that student is taking is accepted by Cambridge or Oxford, their application is seen the same alongside as a domestic UK student's application, as in everything will be looked at all together. And just because they're an international student will not sway a decision as well. So that's something important to note. I've just had it load on me now, so I'm going to be able to find the numbers for Spain for you. So in the last, this is Oxford specific, this is the last 5 years, we've had 1,032 applications, of which 49 have accepted or enrolled. So not much. But don't be too disheartened by that. That is pretty much the same for everybody, no matter which country they apply from. We have, and it'll be similar for Oxford, similar for Cambridge, we had roughly 24,000 applications last year. Of those applications, we then shortlisted 10,000 applicants. And from those 10,000 applicants we shortlisted for interview, we had 3,300 spaces. So that's to give you an idea about the scale of it. I think Cambridge is similar. It just shows you how incredibly competitive it is. So even just being able to put in an application that will be competitive off your grades is great. And then you've got all the other things you've got to take into account as well. So you're already going to be a fantastic applicant if you apply to one of us. Obviously, if you get given an offer, then you're outstanding.
Great, thank you very much for that information. That was great. We have another question from Julian Gonzalez, and I think that that previous answer kind of answered this question in a way, because Julian says, hi, about medicine, I've got several questions. One is, any chance to join in case you don't get a good score at the BMAT? The examination is November, but some of the contents are covered later this year in the IB diploma. And on top of that, I have not taken some of the subjects required, like physics, as option during the whole IB program. So I guess that the chances are not very good for this student because you have not many places for medicine. So what do you think?
Yeah, we can take that. Well, as Tom's just outlined, yes, there are, unfortunately, medicine is the only course where we do have a cap, regrettably, for international students. In terms of the BMAT score, as with all of our admissions tests, this is just one piece of information we look at. It's not, BMAT score is not the only thing that will decide the outcome of a student's application. And just the one thing I'd bear in mind is that every year, the sort of minimum threshold beyond which successful applicants are invited to interview, it will fluctuate. And that just depends on how every cohort does each year. You know, some cohorts will be stronger, some cohorts will perform less well in any given year. So I wouldn't make any snap judgments about your performance in the BMAT, because, as I say, it does go up and down. And either Oxford or Cambridge, your application will be being considered by a college, so they'll be looking at a smaller pool of medicine applicants, and again, the performance might vary quite a lot within their medicine applicants. Just to take the point about subjects and the subjects covered by the BMAT, if you are particularly concerned about any gaps in your knowledge, then I think on the website for the organisation that runs the BMAT, there are lots of resources there that will help you get a sense of what will be covered and how you can go about, as I say, filling those gaps. I wouldn't worry about physics particularly, because I don't think that's an essential subject for either of our university's medicine courses. It's more likely to focus on chemistry and biology, maybe a little bit of maths as well. Great,
thank you very much. I think that those are good news for Julian. So the second question is, are Oxford, Cambridge thinking of helping EU students, particularly with the scholarships after the Brexit? Are there sports scholarship available? Thank you.
So, and there aren't any sports scholarships available at Cambridge, unfortunately. Tom, I'll leave you to speak to Oxford. And of course, it is very much on our minds, the change in financial situation for EU students. And I think, as we perhaps alluded to in the presentation, it's colleges at Cambridge and Oxford that are responsible for undergraduate admissions. So at both of our universities, it's slightly different in the way that we might respond, in that I would really advise looking at different college websites at both Oxford or Cambridge, depending on which university you're thinking of, because colleges are actually able to offer their own sort of financial support, their own packages of financial support to different to students. And it may be the case that a college is able to support you with living costs or with costs towards your tuition fee, for example. So as well as any university-wide or any university-level support that you might be able to receive, as I say, a college could help there as well. So do look at the details on the website. Tom, sorry.
Yeah, that's very similar to what Sam mentioned there with regards to scholarships in general. We do not have many, but it's something that we were trying to see if we can change. There may be some individual scholarships that may be for specific nationalities, but it's something to double check on. We both have scholarship search web pages where you can type in where you're from, the subject you want to study, and see if there's anything there. But we do not have many, sadly. And with regards to sports scholarships, again, no, not for prospective students. If you are very, very good at sports, like we're talking about international level, there is some funding, but you have to be here and as an actual student to get it. It's not something that you can get in the lead up to an application. So yeah, sadly not. It's one of those things at the moment, I'm afraid.
Thank you. So Julian also asks, with regards to medicine, do you know if the studies, the qualification is valid across the EU, or does it need some kind of local validation to be a doctor in that country? Do you know anything about this?
I think before Brexit happened, I believe that if you studied to be a doctor in the UK, you could then practice in the EU. And I think that was vice versa. However, with Brexit, and I could be wrong, I believe that potentially may change, but I don't think it will do. I mean, it's still a medicine degree at Oxford and Cambridge. You may have to, I mean, it would be better to talk to the medicine department specifically about this, because again, Sam and I are very general, and I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I've looked at a couple of things before where you might have to register in the country that you're going to be practicing in. But yeah, it's something that you should be able to get in touch with the medicine department about specifically, because they will be able to, they do it as part of their job day in, day out.
Yeah, thank you for that. In terms of Spain, I would say that you need to do the homologación. So my advice, if it's Spain you're interested in, is to talk to the Ministry of Education and ask about this specifically, Julian. We have another question about how should I choose a college, and also if there is any advantage or disadvantage if I decide to go for the option of open application.
So, I mean, there are quite a few things that you can consider when choosing a particular college. I think the question to always return to is, where would you like to live? I think if you have any preferences at all about where you would like to live, I would advise choosing a college. So would you like to live in a large college where you might have more students doing your course, but you may be less familiar with other students at that college? A smaller college, there may be fewer students doing your course, but on the flip side, you may know students in the years and below and above you a lot better. Most colleges at Oxford and Cambridge are clustered in the city centre of both of our cities, with easy access to a lot of the academic and non-academic facilities that you'll want access to. Some colleges, though, it may be the case that it's closer to your department than others for the course that you're taking. If you want to get up at 5 to 9 and still make it in time for a 9 o'clock lecture, then there are colleges that will let you do that. There are colleges that might be closer to sports facilities or other things that you're interested in getting out of your time at university. I would also recommend, if you have any particular sporting interests or cultural interests, that you look for particular colleges that have certain facilities. So, for example, at Cambridge, there are a small number of colleges that have swimming pools. Only one college has an indoor swimming pool. So if that's a sport you're interested in or want to take up at university, even just as an occasional hobby, then that might guide your college choice. Similarly, if you're interested in music or drama, the arts, there are some of the larger colleges will have student theatres where you'll be able to take part in student societies and put on productions, that kind of thing. So perhaps you would want to bear that in mind as well. Choosing a college isn't really an academic decision, so you're not really looking at which academics are at that college. Most of the teaching for your course will be done centrally in a department. You'll be joined there by students from other colleges who are doing the same modules as you. So as I say, it's not an academic decision really. If you really don't mind where in the university you end up, if you don't have a preference, then you can make an open application. There is, as I think Tom mentioned earlier, there is no statistically significant advantage or disadvantage to either route. Obviously, if you apply directly to a college, you have peace of mind that you're applying somewhere that you've looked at. You would be comfortable living and studying there for your degree. But if, as I say, you genuinely don't mind, then you can make an open application. just bear in mind when you do make an open application, you can't change the college that you're allocated to. You can't even state any kind of preference for a particular college. So it really will be wherever the algorithm puts you.
Thank you for that, Sam. I don't think we have any more questions, Sophia.
Well, then thank you very much. It has been an amazing presentation. Also, thank you very much to the students and the parents that have joined us today. We will send the recording of this presentation soon. And if you have any questions, you already have our email if you want to get in touch with us. Thank you very much.
Have a good weekend, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.